You might not be able to buy a house soon, and it's all because of the Reserve Bank's new mortgage rules. They're called debt-to-income ratios, or DTIs for short, and they mean that some Kiwis can't borrow as much money to buy a house. At the same time, they're letting property investors buy houses with a lower deposit. So what are all of these new rules, and what will happen to house prices? I'm Ed, an economist here at Opes Partners, and this is Property Now. Debt-to-income ratios tie the amount you can borrow to your income. Now, they're not in place yet. The Reserve Bank will probably bring them in between June to July 2024, but they haven't announced a specific date yet. Now, here are the rules the Reserve Bank plans to bring in. You can borrow up to 6 times your income as a homeowner or 7 times your income as an investor. Now, let's say that you and your partner earn $100,000 a year combined. So the maximum you can borrow is $600,000 as a homeowner or $700,000 if you already own an investment property or are about to buy one. Now, that total debt, it includes mortgages, it includes credit cards, student loans, and everything else. So let's say you're a homeowner earning $100,000, the maximum you can borrow is $600K. But if you've got a $20K credit card, a $60K student loan, and a $20K car loan, you've already got $100,000 worth of debt. So there's only $500K left over when you go and try and buy your house. But you need to know that the new rules only count if you are buying an existing property. If you want to buy a new build, forget these new rules, they don't impact you. But how would these new rules impact an average couple wanting to buy an investment property? Let's find out. Jen earns $100,000 and her partner Tim, he earns $50K. So their household income is $150K together. That's actually slightly below average in Auckland. Now, they've owned their own home for a while and they have a small mortgage of $350,000. How much can they borrow for an investment property? Well, their income is $150K, but don't multiply that by 7, because if they buy an investment property, it might rent for $600 a week or $30K a year. Now that rent counts as income too. So add that rental income in, and now their total income will be $180,000. That's what we multiply by 7, and that's how we know that they can borrow up to $1.26 million when they go to buy an investment property. But they already have a mortgage, $350K, and they've already got a credit card worth $10K. We've got to take that off so they can borrow up to $900,000 when they go and try and buy an investment property under these new rules. Now, there's quite a few numbers I've just thrown at you. So if you want to see how the new rules impact you, I built a calculator that you can use to run your own numbers. The link is down in the description. And with all of these new rules, you might be thinking, well, can I still buy a house, and will this cause house prices to drop? In the first few years, the Reserve Bank's changes won't stop you from buying a house, and they could actually boost house prices. Here's why. The new DTI rules will have almost no impact when they first come in. And that's because up to 20% of each bank's lending can still be outside of these rules. So around 1 in 5 investors and 1 in 5 home buyers can get a high DTI mortgage. But interest rates are really high, so it's hard to borrow a lot of money right now compared to your income. Today, less than 1 in 10 homeowners and 1 in 10 investors are actually borrowing at those high debt to income levels. So the banks have a lot of headroom. They can lend even more loans out at these high debt to income levels and still be within the Reserve Bank's new rules. Once interest rates fall though, that's where DTIs come in, because at the peak of the market, somewhere between 35 and 40% of investors were borrowing with a high DTI mortgage, and almost 30% of homeowners, they were taking out a high DTI mortgage as well. So perhaps somewhere between 10 to 20% of homeowners and investors won't be able to borrow as much as they otherwise could when interest rates come down and the new rules are in place. So you might be wondering, if some people won't be able to buy a house anymore and that will reduce demand, why did you say, Ed, that house prices could actually increase when the new rules come in? And it's all because when the Reserve Bank brings in these DTIs, they will also decrease the deposit that you need to buy an investment property. Instead of needing a 35% deposit, investors will only need 30%. That's for an existing property. It's still 20% for a new build. Now, this could encourage some investors to get into the market. It could increase demand, which in turn boosts property prices. And you might think, yeah, that's not much of a difference. The deposit going from 35% to 30%, what sort of impact will that actually have? Well, for renovations investors and those buying existing properties, you guys get a double whammy, because not only do you need a lower deposit, you also can borrow more against your current properties. So let's say that you own an investment property worth $1 million today, and you've got a mortgage of $550,000. Well, you can borrow up to an extra $100K against that property and use that money as the deposit to buy your next investment property. With 35% deposit required, that means your $100K turns into a $286,000 property. That's what you can actually purchase in this scenario. So book a flight to the West Coast. That's probably the only place in the country you are going to be able to buy an investment property. Can't do much with that. But what happens when the rules change? Well, your property is still worth $1 million. Your mortgage has stayed the same, $550K. But now you can borrow $150,000 against your investment property as the deposit for your next one. Use that $150K as a 30% deposit, and now you can purchase a property worth $500K. That's right, you can afford a property worth almost 75% more. Now, the numbers don't work out this way for every single investor, but some investors will soon find that they can now afford to buy their next investment property when they couldn't before. That will increase demand. That's where the boost to the property market will come from, because when they first come in, the DTIs will have no impact, but the LVRs, that's what's going to create that boost. And if you like learning about property in this numbers-focused way, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We release new videos every Monday and Wednesday. And if you do already subscribe, you might be wondering, well, will house prices still go up in the future when the new rules come in? House prices will still go up. Ireland brought DTIs in 2015, and since then, Irish house prices have gone up 64%, or about 6.4% a year. That is really, really quick. 10 years before that, Latvia brought them in too. House prices there have doubled since 2013, and in 2022, Latvian house prices went up 14%. Let's look at Norway. They brought the new rules in DTIs in 2015, and since then, house prices have gone up on average by 4.4%, well over 5% in the most recent year. So the international evidence suggests that house prices can still go up, and even the Reserve Bank agrees. They say in their own consultation paper that the international evidence is mixed regarding the impact of DTIs on house prices. Some studies find significant impacts, others find little to no impact. But it also depends on where you live. In some parts of New Zealand, house prices aren't that high compared to incomes, so the average DTI is on the low side. That's you in Invercargill, where if you bought the average price property with the average income, estimated DTI is about 3.22. In Taranaki, you're all around that 4 to 3 times mark. And that means you're well below the limit, so almost no impact from these new rules. But if you live in Queenstown, or if you live in Thames Coromandel, house prices are really high, but incomes, they're just average. That means that the average DTI in those places are really high, and it's going to make it harder to buy a house in those holiday hotspots. And if you're listening to all of these rules and think, that's it, I'm just going to buy a new build instead, get rid of all of these rules, then head to our website, opespartners.co.nz. We help regular Kiwis grow their wealth through new build investment properties.